We are live! Happy New Year, folks! It's 2023. It's Empire State of Baseball, episode number 36 on this Monday, January the 23rd, 2023, airing exclusively on Twitch, and once again powered by StreamYard. And the boys are back, or at least 3/4 of the crew are missing Tom tonight. But Joe Pugliese, Corey Favaloro, your boy, are back for another calendar year of Empire State of Baseball, back for another off-season episode. Gentlemen, how has your new year been so far, starting with Joe?
It's been pretty good so far. Listen, we Met fans, it's been kind of an up and down off-season already. So, we lost Correa after we stole Correa. The Twins turned around and stole him back from us. But at the end of the day, I'm not really too worried about that. He was a luxury. We can kind of afford to not have him. But overall, it's been a great New Year. It was a great Christmas and holiday. So I hope everybody had the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and pretty much the same over here, too. I mean, I know we had that Correa show, and it's a shame. All that great discussion now behind us. And, unfortunately, he won't be wearing Mets blue and orange this year. But listen, like Joe said, it was a little more of a luxury. Would have been a great asset, exactly what we wanted. Another bat, try to spark that offense in the postseason, guy with a ton of postseason experience. But the good news is, he was going to play third base for this team. Third base is arguably our deepest position entering the 2023 season because you still have Escobar. Beatty, one of your top prospects, is a third baseman. Vientos, one of our other top prospects, third baseman. So there's no shortages of third basemen on the team. Guillorme played a ton of third base. I don't like McNeil at third base. I think he has a weak arm for third base, but you even have him as an emergency option. So you do have a lot of options at third base. It's just more unfortunate that it took a month for that deal to fall through. And in that time, there were a few players like a Michael Conforto, who I thought would have been an awesome fit to come back as a left field DH option, another bat with some pop. He signed just shortly after the Correa news initially broke with the Mets. So they ended up missing out on a few options, but it's not the end of the world. You hope one of these guys steps up, hopefully Beatty, and you roll with what you got.
As Joe and Corey mentioned eloquently, that our last episode of Empire State of Baseball was centered around the agreement of Carlos Correa going to the New York Mets for, at the time, was a multi-year. I believe it was a 12-year contract?
Deal.
Oh man! So it was a wild contract. The Met fans were going nuts. I was producing that episode, watching Corey and Joe just lick their chops, knowing that Carlos Correa was about to suit up in Queens. But of course, that led to the deal with the Minnesota Twins almost a month after the agreement and episode. So, but we are back, first episode of 2023, and we're going to touch on Correa and a couple of those transactions in a little bit. But of course, tonight's episode of the off-season series is going to be centered around the Hall of Fame, since the BBWAA will reveal their ballot tomorrow night on MLB Network. But we had some fun with our program and with our viewers, and we actually constructed the first ever ESB BWAA, which is going to elect a fake Hall of Fame, but it will be the same ballot that you'll see tomorrow that's been voted on by well over 350 voters for the National Baseball Hall of Fame. So that's going to be a lot of fun when we get into it later on tonight. So to be a part of that action, if you are already, thank you so much. But make sure to send out the Twitch link to your friends. And our Twitch link can be found in our bio on Twitter at ESB Podcast. So blast that Twitch link out there. Make sure to get us some viewers and hell, so maybe some new subscribers too. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight on the show. But of course, we're going to start off with the rare state of baseball segment and touch on the rest of the all season and a couple of big moves. Obviously, we've been talking about Correa, so we might as well stay on this. Correa signing with the Minnesota Twins. Now, is this a move that moves the needle for the Twins? Well, no, because it's a re-signing. Correa was there last year. The Twins have been in the middle of a few transactions. I actually just got the note a few minutes ago that Michael A. Taylor acquired by the Twins as well in a trade within division. The Luis Arias trade that happened over the week. So there's been a lot of moves happening in Minnesota, but Does Carlos Correa move the needle for Minnesota, or are we looking at another third-place finish for this team?
Yeah, I mean, it's always weird. I never call it a success when you re-sign your own players. To me, it doesn't move the Yankees don't get extra credit. They get credit for re-signing Judge, but they don't get extra credit. I don't increase their win total for re-signing Judge versus what they did last year. So for the Twins, I don't think it moves their needle that much. They are still at best a once every few years a breakthrough team, but they're not a perennial winning team. They're not. They're very much a flawed team in terms of both the start and rotation, and the fact that their outfield is very dependent on a guy that literally gets hurt once every other month. So, and Correa himself obviously has had the health issues. So, for me, it doesn't move the needle that much for the Twins. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, we saw how desperate they were for pitching. They traded the AL batting champ for a pitcher that is a good pitcher, but he is not a great pitcher. So I'm not 100% sure what this team can be. I think if all breaks well, they could be an 88 win team. But I think we're looking at an 84 to 85 win team at the most in this situation.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the Twins and Correa, and then Joe's kind of on the same wavelength here, it doesn't necessarily move the needle, but it keeps the needle where it was. I mean, that's a piece they brought back. You hope he's going to help the team. They did make some good moves. I mean, they're getting Pablo Lopez now in the rotation. Get Pablo out of the NL East. Although they got Arias, who's a great contact hitter, and contact hitters today are so rare that it's shocking that a team was desperate to just get rid of a pure contact guy. But yeah, it kind of keeps the needle the same. And that division, it could go in any direction. I could easily see the Twins winning that division. The Guardians are right there. It's not a strong division by any means. So overall, it's good for the Twins. I'm not going to say it makes them an instant contender by any stretch, but it's a good move. Glad they got him back. The Twins fans got to be happy with that. And ironically, that's the one team who should know his health the best because he just played with them. Obviously, he failed the physical with the Giants, failed the physical with the Mets. That's two new teams with a failed physical. Don't know how the other clubs across MLB felt with those two results. So it actually made a lot of sense for both Correa and the Twins, if they were comfortable with his health, to just bring him back. And he passed that physical 1, 2, 3. I mean, as soon as they announced the Twins, within a day, they said the physical was passed. So, but yeah, good move for them. But I wouldn't say it moves the needle much, if at all.
No, absolutely not. It made the most sense after the two failed physicals for the Twins and Correa to be the match. And on the 6-year deal, he can make upwards to, I believe, $270 million by the end of his term with the Minnesota Twins. So we'll see how that contract goes. But I think, honestly, for the Mets' sake, and just to touch back on the Mets and Correa point, I think the Mets averted disaster here. Carlos Correa has never been considered a superstar A player on his team. He's always been a top, maybe, all right, you can give the Twins last year, but what the fuck the Twins have? But even on the Astros, during the best parts of his career, he is probably the 4th best player on the team at his very best. I think the Mets were a disaster.
He would, for the Twins last year, 26 home runs, and I think he ended up with like 64 RBIs. Listen, it wasn't about landing yourself a bona fide superstar. He is a luxury. And I think the Mets' idea in signing him was similar to what the Astros was. He is going to be a piece of a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
And when you put him in the 5 hole, that lineup becomes much, much deeper than it would previously be. But if you are counting on Correa, which the Twins are, of being your number 3 hitter, I think he comes up a little light. The luxury of the Mets was you already have Lindor, Marte, Alonso, McNeil, and Nimmo now. You are going to add Correa to that mix, and now all of a sudden that's an all-star caliber player at 6 or 7 spots in the lineup. That's what the appeal is.
Yeah. He's not even the best player on the Twins, by the way.
He's got to be the best player on the Twins because Buxton never plays. I can't.
That's the only problem with
Buxton's
Yep.
One of those guys. He has the athleticism and the talent to be the best player in baseball. He is not that. For me, he's not even a top 50 player in baseball because he's never on the field. Yep. I can't.
Oh, the MLB nerds that. Oh man, they come after us with fucking pitchforks.
You know, yeah, on paper he and when you average out his seasons to 162 games and normalize it, he's as productive as Trout is. But he never plays that. It takes him double the amount of time to get there. And not to mention Trout's no longer a model of pure health either. But at least Trout has seasons where he's played 162. Sure. What's the max Buxton has? 110?
It's got to be right around there. I can't see it much more than that.
So the Mets and Correa don't have the unholy alliance that Yankee fans were quietly hoping for. But the Mets did not have a slowdown in the offseason. And while we were covering Correa, Joe and Corey really didn't mention some of the other moves that were made. So I guess you guys could take the floor here. I mean, the Mets brought back Brandon Nimmo on a nice 8-year, $162 million. And Kodai Senga, who's been long rumored to be headed to Queens, on a 5-year, $75 million deal. So you guys mind touching on that for a little bit between the Senga, Nimmo, and maybe some of the other deals that the Mets have made?
Yeah, I think in general, before we get into the bigger two, I mean, the bullpen itself, I really like what they're doing with the bullpen. And to me, it would be icing on the cake if they go out within the next week and bring in an Andrew Chafin. That bullpen, they've done a great job. A few of these lower-end trades that they've done, bringing in some depth pieces at the major league level. But Robertson, Ottavino coming back. Obviously, we already talked about Diaz because he signed right at the start of the offseason. So they've done a very good job with that bullpen. Chafin would be icing on the cake if they can bring him in. But a little more of a luxury at this point, but he would be very great for this team. Nimmo, to me, got more money than I would have thought. However, I think people underappreciate how good of a player he is comparing him to the other center fielders in baseball. I mean, center fielders, you have some really elite options, but the league average in center field is not really that strong when it comes to offensive numbers. Nimmo is a very solid hitting center fielder, and his defense is where he got the most hate for, and his defense has gotten much better. I mean, I don't have the exact numbers at the moment, but I do know his defensive run saves has improved over the last several years. He's become a much better center fielder. And Kodai Senga, to me, I think when I was comparing him or Bassett, I wanted either of the two back. I think Bassett was the safer play, but Senga is the higher upside play because this is a guy. Listen, are you going to get a Keigawa or are you going to get a Tanaka or are you going to get an Ohtani? You know, somewhere in that range, what level of performance are you going to get? If Senga tops out, let's say at a Tanaka, I would absolutely love it. Perfect 3-starter for this team. And if he does develop into a true ace, well, guess what? You got two older pitchers right now in Verlander and Scherzer. If Senga's really as dominant as they think he could be, guess what? When those two retire, all of a sudden you got your ace. So you're not losing two aces right off the rip. So overall, I like the offseason. I would have liked one more bat, and they still might do a trade. I don't think they will. But so far, so good. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think the Nimmo thing is kind of similar to what Correa is to the Twins. You don't get extra points for re-signing your own player, but I do think that he would have been almost an impossible production to replace, at least for this year, for this team. He does so much in the leadoff spot. He's turned into a very good fielder. He is a top 5 center fielder in baseball. I mean, when you think about the center fielders in the game, it's Trout, it's Julio Rodriguez, it's Buxton when he's healthy, and then it's a drop-off. I mean, it's Nimmo, Harris, and you're going to be hard-pressed to find a top-tier center fielder beyond those guys. So I might be missing one. I think Rich might have a name somewhere in his back pocket, but yeah, so for me, Nimmo was a must resign, especially after DeGrom left. I think you had to. But I think the great part about it is the Mets now have a second forever player beyond David Wright. I mean, Nimmo is going to be the only other Met aside from David, and even his career was cut short. Nimmo's going to be a lifelong Met. I mean, if he leaves when he's 40 years old to play a year in Colorado or something, it is what it is. But Nimmo is going to challenge most of the records in the Met record book just for the fact that he's going to be one of the few guys here. And hopefully a guy like Alonso and McNeil can kind of join him in that. But that's a kind of a key thing from a fandom, that you now have a guy that you know is going to be here. He's going to be part of your franchise for the next 8 years.
Joe, you would think with the Correa noise over, you just mentioned Alonso McNeil, you have to assume one, if not both, could get locked up prior to the season beginning now that Correa money is back in your pocket.
Yeah, listen, McNeil, we've kind of had an up and down relationship with, and I think last year went to show what the patience in the organization and that approach paid off, because he produced a bat title. And there's not a single person on the Mets that say he was the best hitter in the Mets lineup last year. Period. End of story.
100%.
He hit in almost every spot in the lineup. He can play second base, third base in a pinch. He can play both corner outfields, and he's a great fielder. So I think that's it. But Alonso, I don't care about Lindor. The two pitchers are mercenaries, more or less. Alonso's the face of this franchise. I mean, you cannot, if you're the Mets, let Alonso get to free agency. He is the quintessential poster child of what the Mets should be. He is great with the fans. He's great in the clubhouse. He hits bombs, especially with Judge on the other side of the pond. He is a great compliment to what the Yankees have in Judge, just from a back page thing. They can outslug each other any day. He really needs to be a lifelong Met. McNeil, I know, can be kind of in between. He's a little older. He's got a little temperament issue, but I would love to see both of them. And as far as Kodai Senga, listen, the one thing I think Bassett was, yes, the safer pick. The one thing I'm worried about with Bassett is a very, very methodical pitcher. And now with the pitch clock being instituted, the shifts being instituted, I think Bassett is going to have a steep learning curve. And I can see that getting to his temperament, which is one of the reasons why he's such an effective pitcher. But if he's being called on pitch clock violations, I can see how that's going to reduce his effectiveness in the coming year. Who knows? Senga is a mystery. I know he has a devastating split finger. I also know Japanese pitchers, when they come over, have issues with their UCL ligaments because the ball is slightly bigger. And anytime they throw that split change with the ball being slightly bigger, it puts more pressure on your elbow. So listen, we've seen how many of the Japanese pitchers come over and need Tommy John surgery or threatened. Tanaka never actually got it, but so that's going to be a little bit of a question mark. But I think he will be effective enough to compete, and that's the important thing.
That's the main thing. I just want to touch on one thing. I know we have some Yankee stuff we have to talk about as well. One last Mets point. I first of all 100% agree with Joe. Alonso's the face of this franchise, especially with DeGrom leaving. But also now with Correa not joining the Mets, a lot of the talk at the time was, well, now are they going to trade an Escobar? Are they going to trade a Carrasco to try to free up some money? I do not trade these pieces just for the sake of trading them. Escobar, obviously no more, because you need him at third base, him and Beatty and Vientos. And Carrasco, I don't care if he's the fourth starter, the fifth starter, the sixth starter. Quality starting pitching depth could not be more important. There's going to be a point sometime in the season where a pitcher or two is going to go on the IL, and you want to have quality major league depth. Carrasco's been there, done that, has pitched in the postseason, not for the team last year, but in general, he's pitched in the postseason. That's a guy, I think, a great clubhouse guy, great teammate. I want him on this team next year. Do not trade those guys. Keep the depth.
Yeah, 100%. And we've also reached that point of the offseason where you're not going to find any better on the open market. You might, but at this rate, you're now looking at minor league signings and spring training invites. Unless you can guarantee yourself a trade where you can bring in an upgrade, I think the Mets just need to stick with what they have. Even if Escobar is not a starting player and they ride with Beatty as the starting third baseman, Escobar is a solid utility man to have off the bench. So I'm with you. As far as depth goes, those two should stay in Queens heading into the season. So we'll move on to the last bit here, the state of baseball, with the New York Yankees. So obviously the Mets got their pitcher in Kodai Senga. Well, got their pitchers, I would say. They've had a hell of an offseason. The Yankees got a pitcher in Carlos Rodon, a great signing for them, a 6-year, $162 million contract, something that Joe, Tom, and I spoke about concluding the Aaron Judge episode where we were talking about where the Yankees go next. Is it, do they prioritize that left field that has a clear hole, or do they want to strengthen the starting rotation, which it was a rotation that honestly you could have gotten away with heading into the season. This is before Frankie Montas got hurt. So now seeing that this signing happened and that injury to Montas happened as well, it does seem like it was a necessary move for the Yankees to make here in bringing in Carlos Rodon, who is an effective pitcher, who's somebody I think it takes a little bit of the pressure off of Garrett Cole, who is going to have his clunkers. I believe he allowed the most home runs in the league last year. So having Rodon to follow Cole kind of takes a little bit of the steam off of the ace. Rodon, great pickup for the Yanks. Love the move. Joe, Corey, what do you guys think of Rodon as a Yank?
Yeah, listen, there's no denying that it makes this rotation a top-tier rotation in baseball, if not the top tier, depending on who you ask.
Right.
But at the same time, the Yankees' problem was not pitching last year.
No.
The Yankees' problem was offense. And their offense, but despite spending almost $400 million for Judge, their offense has gotten worse. So my problem with the Yankees is, okay, Rodon's great, but if you're not scoring runs to begin with and are dependent on Judge, what could you have done instead?
You lose a lot of 2-0 games, essentially.
You're going to lose a lot of 2-0 games. You're also going to win a lot of 2-1 games or 2-0 games.
True.
So, those tend to even out at the end of the day. But at the same time, they lost Benintendi. You don't know what you're going to get out of the shortstop position or these young kids. You hope that they come up and are able to produce like they are hyped up. But there's sometimes a learning curve when it comes to the major leagues, and especially when you're on a team that has aspirations. Not every shortstop prospect that comes up is going to be Pena from Houston this year. That's an exception to the rule, not the reality. So I think the Yankees got to worry a little bit. I don't know if it's a trade. I don't know. They were not in enough conversations to put themselves where they needed to be offensively. So I can't say that this team has actually gotten better. I think they're about the same. They're just a little bit even more pitch independent than they are, and they are a little bit more heavily gambling on these young kids coming up, which is un-Yankee-like.
Right, and I think fans had to understand it. We talked about this on the show when we were touching on the Yankees' agenda. In the situation that the Yankees were going to bring back Judge, you weren't going to see a lot of moves made. I'm actually kind of surprised the Yankees were able to sign Carlos Rodon after the Aaron Judge signing. It just so happened that, they still had a lot of money that came off the books in their bullpen, and they had enough. I think right now the Yankees have about $700,000 to spare before they enter the next luxury tax, which the Yanks have gone public in saying that they are not looking to go past that threshold. So you might be looking at a closed book on this team, which is unfortunate, looking at who will possibly be in the starting lineup come opening day. But Yankee fans had to know that there were not going to be a lot of moves. So you have to put faith in what you have internally in your system. Unfortunately, between the veterans that the fans want to cast out, that they're paying stupid money to, like Donaldson and Hicks, to the prospects who you're taking a shot on, you have to trust what you have. And unfortunately, I don't know if this team is any better than Toronto, who I think had a good offseason.
True.
So it's going to be tough.
Right.
It is going to be a tough ride for the Yanks, even with the moves they made. But the Rodon signing, I do like him as an addition to the rotation, but they got to improve that offense.
My thing is, sorry, Corey, I'll let you go in a second. My thing is going into the future now, do you even have room to improve this team next offseason? Look at all the players that you have on the books for at least the next 4 years.
You get $25 million off from Donaldson, so that's a good start.
Yeah, but Donaldson's offset by the fact that Glaber and others and Bader and whoever else is going to get increases in arbitration. So that's going to be offset. So where's the money? I mean, you got Rodon, Cole, DJ LeMahieu, Judge. I mean, those guys are taking up, I don't know, 70% of your payroll with not to mention Torres and Rizzo. So I don't know what this does for them long term in terms of being able to fill the offensive need.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. The offensive part definitely is interesting because everyone thought they were going to probably look to improve in the offense. And great, they brought back Judge. So but your offense outside of that, like Joe said, it might even be a little worse. But we'll see what happens. But 2 points on Rodon real quick before we move on. The first, I think a big reason why Rodon is with the Yankees is because of Aaron Judge. I don't know how true the rumors were, but supposedly Aaron Judge was pushing the Yankees to do another move, that move being a Rodon type. Because I would not have been shocked if Judge was really leaning towards the Giants. And then all of a sudden the Yankees came in and said, yeah, we promised we're going to go out there and get a Rodon, bring him in. So I definitely think there could be a little something to that. The other thing with Rodon, if he stays on this current projection, absolutely solid 1-2 punch you have with Cole and Rodon. You have guys like Cortez in the middle of that rotation, high upside guy, but also risk in Severino. If he's your 4-starter, that's a good 4-starter to have. But you got to be a little concerned in terms of dominance. Rodon really has only been putting up these numbers for 2 seasons. And then you look at the seasons before that, a lot of missed time and a lot of pedestrian numbers. So you hope he continues to keep this current trajectory and keep putting up these numbers. But there is some concern because you're not having a guy who's done it his whole career like Cole, who was dominant for a long time before coming. I know he's still younger, but a long time before coming to the Yankees. Rodon is only recently dominant. So hopefully he keeps that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Corey, we're going to go right back to you on this one because we have a Hall of Fame to talk about. That's the centerpiece of tonight's show. Before we get there, though, best way to give us all a follow on our social medias.
Yep, on social media, you can follow us at ESB Podcast. You got myself at G Gory, Rich at Rich J Rivera, and Joe at JR Pugs. And even though he is not here this evening, you can follow Tom at 2Spill on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. 2Spill with some gusto. I like it, Corey. Very good.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. Hall of Fame. It's our biggest topic for tonight. Tomorrow, the BBWAA will select their, or may not select, a nominee for the Hall of Fame, the National Baseball Hall of Fame. We've already know that Fred McGriff is on his way to Cooperstown via the Contemporary Era Committee, which we touched on in a previous episode. Mm-hmm. We also know joining the Crime Dog, we got Pat Hughes, who won the Ford C. Frick Award, and John Lowe, who I believe got the Career Excellence Award. They recently renamed it. It used to be the J.G. Taylor Spink, and then there was some controversy with him. Yeah. So now it's the Career Excellence Award. So 3 members for the class of 2023. Will there be a 4th? Will there be a 5th? Will there be none at all? That is the question. So there are a lot of controversial names, of course, on the current ballot. You got Jeff Kent, who's on his final year. You got Manny, Gary Sheffield, Alex Rodriguez. All our steroid guys are in there. We have some newcomers, Carlos Beltran, everybody's favorite Yankee, Jacoby Ellsbury. So what do you guys think before we get into our own little science experiment we did with Empire State of Baseball of the current crop of nominees?
Yeah, listen, there's 2 categories. There's been 2 categories for a while. There is the key steroid guys on this ballot, and that's Manny and A-Rod, and they are the new version of Bonds and Clemens. I mean, they are qualified to be what I like to call inner Hall of Famers. They are inner circle, maybe top 50 players of all time. In A-Rod's case, he might be a top 10 player of all time. He might be a top 5 player of all time if you don't include the steroids. And then you have a lot of guys who are on the border, who are in that next tier. And that is the biggest challenge on this ballot, is saying who belongs in the Hall of Very Good and who belongs in the Hall of Fame. For me, Hall of Fame is defined by greatness. And I am a small hall guy. I shouldn't have to think twice if you are a Hall of Famer. In this case, we have a lot of guys that at certain points might have touched greatness, but are they great players in terms of the history of the game and their impact on the game? That I don't know about. It makes some very, very interesting debates with a bunch of these guys right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with Joe in terms of small hall. And it was actually Mike Francesa, listening to him on the afternoon drive coming home from work, and he always preached the same thing, small hall, small hall. Because back in my day, when I was younger, I used to always be like, oh, yeah, if I had the votes, I'd like to use all 10. Why not? But he really changed my thought. I thought he brought up a lot of great points. So I'm with Joe there and Mike about the small hall. I do agree. It's about greatness. And I'd rather a guy be in the Hall of Fame who was absolutely dominant for 5 to 10 seasons than a guy who played 20 years. And Craig Biggio, for example, 3,000 hits. But when in your life have you ever said, oh man, Craig Biggio is up, we can't get to Biggio, let's walk this guy? It was never Biggio. He was sometimes the third or fourth best hitter on that team between Bagwell, between Berkman, Carlos Lee. I mean, you look at those.
Preaching to the choir, Corey.
What was that?
Preaching to the choir.
Exactly. So I definitely prefer greatness over compiling. I know that's the word we like to use. But at the same time, how long are you sustaining that greatness? Because you could have guys come and go, kind of like a Tim Lincecum, for example, dominant for 3 or 4 years. What did he really do outside of that? So how dominant were you, and for how long did you sustain it? Johan Santana, another perfect example, absolutely dominant for half a decade. Injuries completely derailed his career. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but that he did have sustained dominance for like 5 years in a row. So it's interesting. I'm a small hall guy. I did vote for a few guys in my ballot. I absolutely did not use the full 10, but we'll see my results in a little bit.
I used the full 10, and I know I'm probably going to get shit for it, but I've just seen over the last 10 years too many non-BBWAA selections that, to me, I would have to vote the full 10 just to see if I can get somebody in there, and throw a dart at. Listen, if you're on the ballot and you've been there for a few, I feel you've done enough to make the argument to get there. So I feel like there's somebody who's got to get in, especially some of those mid-tier guys. I've also come to the belief that if you don't get elected within your first 3 years on the ballot, you probably are going to have to wait until your 10th if you get on it at that point. I feel like those mid-tier guys, a lot of the contemporaries that we see on this ballot, because there's a lot of guys who are in that their 4th through 6th or 7th on the ballot, I feel like they're going to have a tough time getting in tomorrow. So then you look at a guy like Jeff Kent. Does Jeff Kent have enough to get in? There's 2 schools of thought, honestly, on him. And it's not, honestly, it does not favor one way or the other. So Jeff Kent, just real quick, because I want to just pick on a couple of players here that are on the ballot. Where do you guys stand with Jeff Kent here?
I don't understand the hate for Jeff Kent. This is one of the greatest. When you're talking about second baseman in the Hall of Fame and the scope of what second basemen are in the Hall of Fame, they are defense first players. This is now a player who is the opposite. He is an offense first player. And for whatever reason, the Hall of Fame has been defined by offense for generations. And we only go the other way on the supreme the Brooks Robinsons of the world, the Ozzie Smiths of the world, the top of the top in terms of Gold Gloves and defensive prowess. Those guys get in on rare occasions simply due to their defense. But now we've seen to kind of come to a midpoint where we're starting to take non-defensive prowess, and in Jeff Kent's case, he is a completely average fielding second baseman. I think his defensive runs saved over his entire career is like -2, which is not bad. I mean, guys have -2 in one season, and he played second base till he was 40 years old. My thing is, he is the all-time home run leader at the position. He hit 290 lifetime. He has 1,500 RBIs. He won an MVP. And I understand Bonds was protecting him, but still, that's a second baseman that the only person who threatened his offensive prowess at second base in the last decade was Robinson Cano, and he got himself kicked out. So I don't get what we missed here on Jeff Kent. I don't understand why all of a sudden we've got picky. I know he's a little bit of a jerk, but I like, what are we doing here? Compared to Kurt Schilling, he's a church mouse. He's an altar server. I mean, I don't get it. I'm frustrated by it. He's going to probably eclipse the 55, 60% mark, which will double what he got. I think he also got hurt because the last few years, he's had all these steroid guys. And he's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle. And now that the steroid guys are basically off, he's on his last leg, and he just doesn't have enough momentum to get it.
Yeah, I want to point out a period of Jeff Kent, 1997 to 2005, 296 batting average, 253 home runs, a slugging of 529 as a second baseman.
What else do you need?
That's insane. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Listen,
No, I mean,
and I go by, listen, I think a guy needs a period of dominance of around 6 to 7 years of what you would consider a Hall of Fame year, right? So like there's a difference between compilers, like we said with Biggio and the Harold Baineses of the world. And then there's guys where I consider what they do at their position as Hall of Famers and Hall of Fame years. And if you look at Kent and you start from, forget the years with the Mets, start in 98, 287, 31 home runs, 128 RBIs as a second baseman, Hall of Fame year. The next year, 290, 23 home runs, 101 RBIs as a second baseman, Hall of Fame year. 333 average, 424 on base percentage, Hall of Fame year as a second baseman. 298 the year after, 22 home runs, 106 RBIs. The year after, 37 home runs, 108 RBIs, all as second baseman. He never had a fall off. So what are we missing here?
His final year of his career as a 40-year-old second baseman, he hit 280, played 121 games. I mean, that is incredible. Now, it's touched on that point that we pick on a period. So I wanna throw this to Corey now. Corey Favaloro, is Andrew Jones a Hall of Famer?
100% yes. And I'm going to give some reasons why. I know we're going to touch on him a little later. I have Carlos Beltran in my Hall of Fame ballot. I selected Beltran. And when you're comparing the numbers, the argument that I made for Beltran by default means I have to pick Andrew Jones. And I think the problem with Andrew Jones is that people forget about him because he fell off hard. He was a terrible player at the end of his career, and he was still relatively young. It's not like he was 40 years old and putting up bad numbers. He was like in his mid-30s, and he was like a useless player at that point. Andrew Jones, another problem with him is he wasn't the most popular Jones on his team. I mean, he played with Chipper for all those years in Atlanta, but you look at what he did. 5-tool player. The guy had 10 Gold Gloves in a row. I mean, the guy is a defensive genius. Carlos Beltran, 435 home runs over the course of his career. Andrew Jones had about 1,000 less at-bats and had 1 less home run. The guy was an absolute stud. I talked about fearing guys before, right? I never feared Craig Biggio. I feared Andrew Jones when the Mets were facing him because you had Andrew Jones and Chipper back-to-back in that lineup, throwing like a Marcus Giles and some random other players who were in right before them. I said to myself, man, we got to get Marcus Giles out because the last thing I want to do is Marcus Giles getting on base and then Jones hitting a bomb. So I do think Andrew Jones is a player. A lot of people forget about him because of how hard he fell off. He could have had much better numbers, but I still think he put up enough to get him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to disagree with Corey on that one. My problem with Andrew Jones is at the age of 30, he was hitting 222. His average for after the age of 30 is 202. There is no Hall of Famer in the Hall of Fame that doesn't qualify as greatness. And it's not like he did so. It's not like he did so due to injury. He got fat and lazy. I mean, let's just call it what it is. I mean, he gained 50 pounds. by the end of his tenure in Atlanta. So for me, I can't reward that. And Rich, you can put my ballot up real quick, and I know it's a little.
Don't have it up.
Oh,
That's
really?
an unprofessional job by me, but I have no ballots here. I kept them
Well, so on my ballot, I actually voted for Torrey
anonymous.
Hunter.
Wrong word.
I actually voted for Torrey Hunter, and not that I necessarily think that Torrey Hunter should be in the Hall of Fame, but Torrey Hunter has almost 500 more hits, over 100 more doubles, more triples, a couple hundred more RBIs, hit about 25 points higher in batting average, has the same as within a point of the OPS plus, and has, I think, 7 Gold Gloves. So why are we talking about Andrew Jones when Torrey Hunter has better numbers for his career and Torrey Hunter never really fell off? I mean, he moved to right field. He wasn't quite the same fielder, but as far as with the bat, he stayed pretty consistent. I did that more to kind of show that Jones is, for whatever reason, getting glorified, but I cannot put a guy that basically put an incomplete in. And for me, Jones feels like an incomplete.
It's tough with Jones too, because Hunter had the better career for sure. Beltran, similar numbers in a lot more years. But
Beltran was a base stealer, and Beltran, and the other thing that Beltran has that very few people, other than Chipper Jones and Mickey Mantle, Beltran is is one of the top 5 switch hitters in history of baseball. That is a huge factor. That Beltran did it from both sides of the plate. There aren't very many switch hitters in the Hall of Fame.
So let's stay there. Carlos Beltran. Now we looked at the crop of new entries on the ballot, and I think a bunch of people who are viewing in have seen this ballot over the last couple of days, I believe. But the italicized players are the very new candidates on this list, and I mean it's kind of pathetic when you see some of those names, but Carlos Beltran, I believe, sticks above the rest. You know, K-Rod, I think, is definitely going to make an argument to stay on the ballot if he can get that extra 5%. But Carlos Beltran will stay there. Is Carlos Beltran a Hall of Famer? Met fans, what are we thinking?
I mean, I think he is, but for the same I put him in there because, one, he's a 5-tool player. I mean, he was a great defender. He won 3 Gold Gloves. Andrew Jones won 10 in a row. Great power hitting switch hitter, 435 home runs over, was it 11,000 at bats? Andrew Jones had 1 less home run in about 9,000 plate appearances. So, big difference there. But Beltran was a great player. And again, I think what might hurt him a little bit with the voters, one is the cheating scandal. And I don't really care. I voted for steroid guys. I don't care. Beltran to me is still a Hall of Famer. I'm not going to count that. The other thing that hurt him was those late Mets years, because he was on such a trajectory. 06, 41 home runs, 116 RBIs. 07, 33 home runs, 112 RBIs. He had 112 RBIs in 08, despite only 27 home runs. But then he fell off. He had 81 games in 09, 84 games in 2010. He started the season late in 2011, then got traded to the Giants. Those latter Met years, unfortunately, hurt him a little bit because he missed a lot of time. But still, a 5-tool player, great defender. I think he was a great baseball guy, despite the cheating scandal at the very end of his career. To me, he's a Hall of Famer. At a premier position, too. Again, we were talking about Brandon Nimmo and about how weak center field is. Center field is a premier position where, in addition to catcher and maybe shortstop, you're willing to sacrifice offense to get great defense. Beltran did both, and Andrew Jones.
Yeah, I think Beltran's a Hall of Famer. A lot of the reasons Corey just mentioned. He's a Gold Glover. He's a fantastic player. He's a fantastic base runner. He's got a member of the 200 club, which is extremely rare. Here's a good stat I saw. The only other switch hitters with as many hits, home runs, and career OPS as Carlos Beltran, Chipper Jones and Eddie Murray. So, and he's one of the 5 members of the 300 steal 400 home run club. So 5 members of that club. That's elite. And the switch hitting aspect of it puts him over the top. Listen, the cheating scandal is going to cost him a couple years. He's going to get in. The writers like to dole out punishment, especially ones that have gone unpunished. Well, in Beltran's case, he lost a job. But they like to dole out punishment and giving you a little purgatory waiting period. But Beltran's going to get in. He's too good not to. And I think he was just a model of consistency of his career. And regardless of what you say about the cheating scandal, he was a huge leader. And not to mention, he is one of the all-time great postseason hitters. So he's got a 300, 400, 600 slash line in the postseason. Do you know who the only other player who's played at least 40 postseason games is to have that slash line? His name is Babe Ruth.
Oh, okay. Good
All
company.
Good. That's pretty good company. So those are the three of many that are on this ballot. But we're not going to have enough time to honestly touch on every single one. I'm sure. Yeah, listen, everybody wants to get in on the A-Rod mix and the Billy Wagner mix, but we'll have another year or so to get into it. But I want to get into our own ballot. So if you've been with us for the last few days, we've been collecting ballots for a new Writers Association that no one's heard of. The ESBBWAA, the Empire State of Baseball Writers Association of America. When we have a Hall of Fame selection that we want to announce tonight, or selections that we want to announce tonight, I was even presented the official certified envelope here.
Yeah.
This was FedEx overnighted like next minute. This is crazy that we got this so quickly. So I'm going to reveal the winner of that ballot. And again, this is the Hall of Fame ballot that many of you saw. We were happy enough to bring in well over 30 ballots. So we want to thank you all, our viewers who are the pseudo committee, to say the least, and of course, including the four esteemed hosts of Empire State of Baseball. So with that said, gentlemen and ladies, it is now time to reveal the winner of the ESBBWAA ballot, who will not be getting elected into the Hall of Fame tonight, but might be getting elected into the Hall of Fame tomorrow on Emily Network for reals. So let's see who we have here, and it could be an empty page. Who knows? Let's see. All right. Thank you for the drum roll. The Empire State of Baseball Association of America, whatever the fuck we're called, we have elected a Hall of Famer. There will be one Hall of Famer joining Cooperstown. This player has had a 20-year career, a 279 batting average, a 350 on base, 435 home runs, and 1,587 RBIs in his career. He is a 1999 Rookie of the Year, a 9-time All-Star, the 2017 World Series champion as part of the Houston Astros, a 3-time Gold Glover, 2-time Silver Slugger. He is one of the greatest switch hitters of all time. Puerto Rico, be proud. Your son, Carlos Beltran, is now a member of Cooperstown. Congratulations.
Nice. Very
Carlos
good.
Beltran, the newest member of the National Baseball Hall of Fame, according to us schmucks who have no votes in the actual BBWAA. But that's our guy. It is Carlos Beltran. And what a career for Beltran. And again, is this a guy that we see as a first ballot Hall of Famer for real? I don't know. I mean, the 2017 scandal is going to have a lot to do with it. But Beltran as a selection, I guess, guys, since we just touched on it before, I guess we're feeling good about this as the pick.
Yeah, no, definitely 100%. I mean, he was on my ballot. And we were looking at the live numbers as they were coming in, and Beltran was always right on the cusp with a few other players right on the cusp. One ballot, he's up. One ballot, he's down. Look at that, right at 75%. One that surprises me was A-Rod. I also vote for A-Rod. I know a lot of people won't because of the steroids, but there was a point last night where he was like 90%. I was like, oh, wow, A-Rod's got it locked up. Good for him. And then we had the older conservative off of social media vote come in late last minute. Yep, the dead ballot. That's what always happens. All these controversial guys lose votes in the final days. That's what happened with A-Rod. I voted for him. I thought he should have got in, but he fell off hard in the recent ballots. And here you go over here. Omar Vizquel getting a vote, 6.3. Bobby Abreu, look at that. Mark Burley, a little love. A lot of zeros over here. I mean, you got a couple of guys here. Again, all guys who I did not vote for, so no surprise there, nor would I consider a vote for them. But yeah, interesting ballot. Billy Wagner was close at just under 72%. But then you have those guys, Rodriguez, Helton, Ramirez, Sheffield, all right around 60 or so votes. Almost got in. But, we'll see. A few more ballots their way, they would have got in. But Jeff Kent not making the cut.
So, the thing with me for A-Rod, and I'm one person I did not vote for A-Rod. I did vote for Beltran, Wagner, Helton, Sheffield, Kent. And I don't know if I missed one in there. No, and I voted for Torrey Hunter, kind of proof point. The only thing I have with A-Rod and Manny that to me separates them from the other steroid guys that came before. A-Rod and Manny were suspended for steroids. In Manny's case, multiple times. For me, I have a clear distinction. I think Bonds and Clemens did it in an era where it was very much a level playing field. And for me, I cannot hold it against them that baseball did not properly enact rules to stop it. I think that there is upwards of 50, maybe 60, 70% of the game that was on steroids in the 90s. So I don't hold that against them. What I do hold against A-Rod and Manny is that when MLB came up with the set of rules and say, no, if you violate this, you will be suspended for half a season. And then with the upward mobility of the punishments, that to me is a separator and a line in the sand that says, okay, these are guys, there's cheating because everybody's doing it and everybody's getting away with it. And there's no hard, fast rule to stop them or prevent them from doing so. And then there's cheating to try and cheat a system that is created to stop you from cheating. And that's where I think there's a difference in terms of A-Rod and Manny. So I didn't vote for them. And that's my reasoning behind that.
Yeah,
Wagner, if put on 2 more ballots that would have came in, would have also made the 75% threshold. I tell you what, we were coming down to the wire when we were about to close these ballots. We actually were about to have no Hall of Famer, and then the last 2 ballots that trickled in had Beltran on it, and Beltran is in at the very minimum, the 75%. I had to recount the votes multiple times, but Beltran is in according to our ballots. I don't know if this is going to be a reality tomorrow, boys, but at least we were able to elect somebody.
Yeah, no, I'm happy we got Beltran in, guy who played for both teams. So happy about that. We got a New York guy in there. But yeah, and the whole steroid thing with A-Rod, with Manny, I mean, Bonds and Clemens more recently, it's an interesting debate. I think Joe brought up a good point about these were guys who got caught after the rule changes. The reason I'm going to turn a blind eye towards steroids for a couple of reasons. One, I think steroids in baseball is a little overrated because there's so much that goes into hitting a baseball. I could get juiced up on steroids right now and look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in a couple of months roiding up. I'm not going to hit a baseball, all right?
Schwarzenegger now, though.
Yeah, you need the eye. You need a perfect swing. You need the bat speed to it. You have to get the bat on the ball, and you have to hit it perfectly to hit out of the park. I think steroids make a great player better, but if you get a 210 hitter and put him on roids, he's still hitting 210. The only difference is a couple of those flyouts might go over the fence. So
the problem is most of these guys were great players before the steroids.
Correct, exactly. Like Bonds,
the difference is the steroids made them from good Bonds in particular, and A-Rod's probably another one. They turned great players who are probably Hall of Famers into the greatest person that has ever walked the face of the earth on a baseball field. I mean, that's what Bonds was. Bonds made the game look silly.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the difference. You took a player that didn't need the help, and you brought him to a level that dictators of the Soviet Union level of fear. I mean, that's the kind of fear that Bonds inspired in people. So that's my thing. I do have a question touching on this because I know Rich voted. I wouldn't be surprised if Tom voted for him. Do you? I really got an honest question. Do you Yankee fans really think Andy Pettit's a Hall of Famer? What'd
You
you
said I
say?
voted for him. I didn't vote for him.
I don't know. I assumed. But
I didn't vote for Andy
33% of
Pettitte.
our ballots.
No, there is, yeah, and I'm actually kind of surprised with the amount of Andy Pettitte votes that trickled in. I mean, right there with Scott Rowland and Jimmy Rollins, and honestly, between the three of them, maybe you make the more of the argument for Scott Rowland between the three. Yeah, Pettitte to me is not a Hall of Famer. There's no Hall of Fame for just postseason performance.
And
Andy
it's
Pettitte,
not like he was Kurt Schilling in the
doesn't make it.
postseason.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a good pitcher in the postseason, but he wasn't Kurt Schilling. He wasn't.
But I think it's safe to say if they just had a Hall of Fame based on postseason performance, I believe Pettitte would get it. Overall, no, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, do you guys like Jameson Taillon? What Jameson Taillon did last year is literally Andy Pettitte's career average. That doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. Same with Mark Buehrle. And listen, Mark Buehrle, I think, has a better case than Andy Pettitte because Mark Buehrle's got 10 gold gloves or whatever he's got. He was the greatest fielding pitcher of his generation. And not to mention, Mark Buehrle, I just looked this up today because I was curious. Mark Buehrle, out of his rookie year where he only pitched, he pitched out of the bullpen, never started less than 30 games in his entire career. That's crazy.
Oh, yeah. Very durable.
That is crazy.
Very durable guy. I loved having him on my fantasy team. I loved having Mark Buehrle because he was never missing time. So.
And he was a very likable player. I always liked watching Buehrle pitch, but also did not get my vote. The Buehrle one kind of scratched my head, but I think when you had the 10 max, then it kind of got a little wild. I actually threw a vote to Bobby Abreu, who didn't do too well on the ballot. But I threw him one. Love Bobby.
Very good.
But, So we will close on that note. Joe, best way to check out some of our last episodes on YouTube, especially that great Carlos Correa episode that you and Corey did such a great job. What's the best way to view that?
Go on YouTube, check out full episodes of Empire State of Baseball. They're up on our YouTube page. You can like, share, and subscribe each of the videos, and you can view them at your leisure. The new episodes will be posted once they are uploaded in the next day or two.
Yeah, and that episode will be up later on tonight as the Hall of Fame election is official tomorrow, the real one, on MLB Network at 6 p.m. We'll find out who the BBWAA selects to that Hall of Fame. It, again, could be nobody. And there's a real possibility that could happen. I mean, what do you guys think? You think tomorrow we're probably not going to see a Hall of Famer get added to this current crop?
It's possible. I mean, there's a couple of guys lingering up there. Actually, I was checking a few of the current projections at the moment. They have the Baseball Hall of Fame tracker. I didn't see the full list. I was just trying to check on when we're doing the Carlos Beltran, Andrew Jones debate. I checked both of them. Beltran was around 55%. Jones was around 67, 68%. So that tells me that neither of them are going to get in because the votes tend to go down with these latter ballots. But Andrew Jones could trend that way. I know he's like on his sixth ballot or so he's getting close. But Beltran being a first ballot, he'll finish around 50, 55, slowly make his way up to 60, and he'll get in after 3 or 4 years.
Beltran's going to wait, like I said, for the whole thing with the Astros. I think the two closest names right now are going to be Helton and Roland. I know Roland is a sabermetric darling. They love his defense. Listen, I watched Roland play the Mets all the time. Again, Hall of very good player. At times, touch greatness with his defense. But at the end of the day, I don't consider Roland a Hall of Famer, even though he does play a premium position. Helton is such an odd case because he has the Coors effect. And in my mind, if Helton was on the Kansas City Royals, would we ever think that Helton is a threat to be a Hall of Fame? I don't know the answer to that.
Correct.
We know Coors has a little bit of an effect. He was the most consistent player that probably has ever played in a Rockies uniform. There was no peaks and valleys with him. Every year was almost the same. He had a tremendous on-base percentage. So I think that's going to be close. I wouldn't be surprised if he has to wait another year, but I think he's going to get in eventually. And that'll be interesting.
Yeah, Helton to me, he was prime. Like there were two players where if it was a different year, I might have voted them in because I did use 6 picks. Helton was one of my 50-50s. I almost did it, and Kent was also up there. The thing with Helton
Yeah,
and Coors, the thing with Helton, though, it's like the whole Coors Field argument. He would have had a lot less. I mean, for a first baseman who played 17 years, and first baseman's typically a slugger's position, 369 home runs. Now, granted, I would have loved Todd Helton to be my first baseman from the years of 97 through 2013, but he had under 20 home runs for his last 8 seasons. Each of his last 8 seasons under 20 home runs. It was really only the early 2000s. He had a 42, he had a 49, he had a 30, a 35. Other than that, 20, 15, 17, 7, 15, 8. In Coors Field, too. I think that hurt him. Also, I always thought Todd Helton was one of these guys who won a ton of gold gloves because he was a great first baseman. He only had 3. When I saw that he only had 3 gold gloves, I was genuinely shocked because I always thought he was a great first baseman. He was, but obviously there were guys better than him for most of his career. So one of those borderline players. If he gets in, I'll be happy for him, but we'll see what happens.
I'll touch on one former Met, Billy Wagner, 2.31 ERA as just a reliever in 16 years. During the height of steroid era baseball, I feel like that does not get enough love. He's somebody who I think is considered in the top 10 or at least 15 best relievers of all time. I think he's somebody who should definitely get a respectable shot at getting into the Hall of Fame. I think he's going to net a few votes tomorrow. I don't think he gets in. I actually am going to predict I don't think anybody gets in tomorrow, boys. So we'll see how it wraps up. But I will say this as we close the show. Our next episode of Empire State of Baseball, which is episode number 37, barring we have another emergency episode and have to renumber the episode here, will air live on Monday, February 27th. It will be our spring training special. We're also going to get into the all-season report cards of the Mets and Yankees, because at that point I would think the all-season would be a wrap as far as transactions goes for both of these teams. You never know when an IKF Josh Donaldson kind of move happens at the very end, but we are going to give a full letter grade on our team's performance during this offseason and preview the start of spring training, because we're right around the corner of pitchers and catchers. The Super Bowl is almost here. And I know we're not that show. It's not Empire State of Football. Super Bowl predictions to end the show. What do we got here, boys?
This is tough. I think it's going to be the winner of that Chiefs-Bengals game. I think it's going to be one of those two teams, and we'll see how bad Mahomes is hurt, because Mahomes' injury is still lingering. I think the Bengals end up winning that game, but I think it's going to be I'm going to say the Chiefs, but it's going to be one of those two teams.
Yeah, I think Chiefs 49ers. 49ers defense is going to be too much for the Eagles. And I think Mahomes gets his revenge on Burrow for last year. So I'm going Chiefs over the 49ers.
Anybody but the Philadelphia Eagles. Sorry, Kate. All righty. We'll see you here next month. Just want to go around the room real quick with some thank yous. Corey?
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys. Rich, thank you again for helping with the graphics tonight. Thank you to the 32 people who put in ballots for us. We had great fan participation, and we sent out these ballots pretty late, too. So thank you, all the fans, chooches in the chat out there who gave us a ballot this evening.
Yeah, thank you. That was great turnout in terms of a ballot. We were approaching, I think we needed 5 or 6 more ballots to approach 10% of the total amount of voters this year. So that was a great job, great participation to everybody out there. So that was a fun little thing that we did.
100%. Next year, we'll get that ballot out a month in advance, so we get even more voters in by the time that we do this show next year. So thank you all who participated with the ballots. Good luck to all the nominees who are on the actual BBWAA's ballot for tomorrow. We will see who gets in, if anyone gets in, at 6 p.m. on MLB Network. Until then, and until our next episode on February 27th, take care.